want to introduce you to micropipetting. So here I have a set of micropipetters that span various ranges of volumes. So we have pipetters that can deliver very, very small volumes of liquid with precision, and that's where micropipetters come into play. Typically anything around 1 milliliter and less than that, we want to go to a micropipetter. So micropipetters, we have a full set in this lab is typically made up of 3 pipetters that span a range from 0.5 microliters, so half a microliter, very tiny volume, all the way up to 1,000 microliters, which is 1 milliliter. So when we're deciding which pipetter to use, you have to know which volume that you want to measure. So if I want to measure a full milliliter, I'm going to take the largest pipetter. You can actually see that it's larger than the others. And if I look at the very top of it, it tells me the range of volumes that this pipette can deliver accurately. So this pipette can deliver between 100 and 1,000 microliters. So if I want to measure 50 microliters, I can't use this pipette because that's less than 100. It has to fall in that range. All right, because there's a range, I have to tell the pipette which volume in particular I want. So right now, this pipette reads 100. That's actually set to 1,000 microliters. If I wanted to change that to measure 900, I would spin this top dial. As I'm spinning it, I'm watching the numbers on the side change. So this reads 090, that's 900 microliters. All right, if we look at some of the other ones, the next size we have is 20 to 200. It measures between 20 microliters and 200 microliters. Again, make sure that your volume of interest falls in that range. If I wanted to measure 80 microliters, this would be the right pipette. 80 is between 20 and 200, and I can set the dial to read 80. And that one's ready to go. The third pipetter in the set has a range of 0.5 to 10 microliters. Very small. It's obviously the smallest pipette in the bunch, and it works the same way. The last digit, the digit on the bottom here, is red on most of our pipetters because that's the tens place. So this pipette right now is actually reading 10.0. And you would know that because this range maxes out at 10 microliters. So although this looks like 100, it can't be. 100 is out of range. This is 10.0. And I can adjust this too. I can deliver volumes like 7.7 microliters. All right, so those are our 3 pipettes. When you want to measure a volume, you can't just use the pipette. You never want any part of the plastic pipetter to get into the liquid that you're measuring. We always use something called a pipette tip. And there are 3 different sizes of pipette tips that line up with the 3 different sizes of pipetters. So I'm working with the pipette of the range 100 to 1,000 microliters. For short, we call this the P1000. We shorten the names of all of these with a P and the largest volume that that pipette is capable of measuring. So the P1000 uses the 1,000 microliter sized tips. They again are the biggest tips. So to get a tip onto your pipetter, you start with a closed box that has been autoclaved. I know it's been autoclaved because it has this tape on it. This is autoclave tape. If it's gone through the autoclave, which is the sterilization process that we use here at DORT, these lines here turn black. They start out white. So because these are black, I know this has been autoclaved. Because it's been autoclaved, I know that the tips inside of here are sterile and they're ready for me to use. They're not going to introduce any kind of contaminants into my experiment. So to get a tip onto my pipetter, I open this and I just kind of stab a tip onto the end, and it fits tightly. I want to make sure that I always close my tip box because, again, these were sterile, so you don't want to expose them to the environment any longer than you have to. So now I have this pipette tip at the end of my pipetter, and I'm ready to suck up some liquid and dispense it wherever I want it to go. So I want to measure a full milliliter, which is 1,000 microliters. So I have my pipetter set, and I have my tip on, and I have my solution that I want to measure. So there are 2 different buttons on micropipetters. There's this plunger that I also used to set the particular volume. This plunger presses down with 2 different stopping points. If I press the plunger down here, it stops, but then I can press it a little bit further and it reaches a second stopping point. When you want to suck liquid up into the tip, make sure you only depress the plunger to the first stopping point. All right, so I'm at that first stopping point and I'm going to press the plunger again to that first stopping point. Put the tip in the liquid so that the opening of the tip is fully submerged, and slowly release the plunger with my thumb. If I go too fast, the liquid's going to kind of jump into the tip and you'll get air pockets. And if I don't keep the bottom of the tip submerged, you're also going to get air pockets. So what you're looking for is a solid, obvious volume of liquid in your pipette tip without any air pockets. If there are air pockets, then you aren't measuring the full 1,000 microliters. All right, so now I have my solution in the tip. To dispense it, I'm going to press the plunger again to that first stop. But now I also am going to go to the second stop to get any extra liquid that might be stuck in the tip out. That extra stop puts a burst of air behind the liquid to get all of it out of the tip that you had in there originally. All right, whenever I've finished using a tip, I use the second button on the pipetter to eject the tip. This button here is the tip ejector. If you press it, your tip goes flying off the end and you're ready to get a new one. All right, so we have 1,000 microliters in this little bubble here. I'm going to take my next size pipetter, which is the P200, and set it to 100. And if I've pipetted 1,000 microliters well here, I should be able to pipette 100 microliters 10 times and transfer this entire puddle over to a new puddle. So I have my pipetter set, got the plunger depressed. Sorry, we don't want to do that. I have my pipetter set, and I'm going to go in and get a sterile tip. So because I'm using the P200, I need to use those size tips. I see that it's sterile. I'm going to open it, get a tip. As I'm getting things ready, I accidentally hit the carousel for the pipetters. Now my tip has been exposed to something in the environment and I don't want to trust it anymore. So make sure that once you put a tip on your pipetter that you're ready to use it. Otherwise it's easy to kind of fling it around if you're doing something else and you compromise your tip. So I think I've compromised my tip. I'm going to go grab a new one. And then I'm going to start transferring this liquid over. So there's 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. All right, so now I've had practice using my P200. Now I'm going to go to the smallest pipetter that we have, the P10, and set that to 10 microliters. Again, it looks like 10.0 on the dial. Use the tips for the P10. And I'm going to transfer over a couple of tipfuls here. There's 10 microliters. Remember that all of the pipettes work the same. When you want to suck liquid up into the tip, depress the plunger down to the first stop, put your tip in the solution and slowly release. You can watch the liquid come up. Then when I want to dispense the liquid, go all the way through to the second stop. When I'm finished with that tip, I'm going to use the tip ejector. All right, so the smallest volume that we've measured so far is 10 microliters. I do want to quick show you what very, very small volumes look like because they're harder to keep track of. So if I set my P10 to read 0.15, I'm going to be pipetting 1.5 microliters. Very small volumes. All right, so let's get a new tip. And now when you depress the plunger, you see that it hardly goes down because I'm not going to be sucking very much liquid up. So I'm pressing the plunger down to the first stop, sucking liquid up, and although it's hard to see, you can still see the line of liquid inside my pipette tip. Now when I go to deliver it somewhere, I'm going to put it right here, I'm going to visually inspect my tip again to make sure that that volume has been transferred where I want it to go. It can be easy to lose track of these really, really tiny volumes, so visually inspecting your tip is always a good idea, but especially with these really, really small volumes.